On a stormy afternoon in the sleepy town of Pinewood, 4-year-old Ethan Wilson pressed his face to the cold window of his family's kitchen. Rain poured down in sheets, bouncing off the backyard deck and beating against the glass-like fingers. Drumming a warning, inside, the smell of homemade stew filled the warm air, and the soft clink of dishes was the only sound until it wasn't. "Mommy," Ethan whispered, his voice thin as fishing line. "Do you hear that?" Olivia Wilson glanced up from the sink, her hands wet, her hair tied in a quick bun that was already starting to fall loose. "Just the wind, sweetie," she said with a kind of tired patience moms wear like armor. "Sometimes the wind cries through the trees when it's stormy," but Ethan's eyes didn't move. He was still staring out at the woods behind their backyard, where the lawn met the start of pinewood forest, thick and quiet and dark, even on sunny days. "No, Mom," he said slowly. "That's not wind. Something's sad out there." He didn't wait for permission. In the time it took Olivia to dry her hands and turn around, Ethan had already slipped off the bench, padded barefoot to the back door, and stepped onto the porch. The door creaked open behind him with a gust of wet wind. Rain smacked the porch railings like it was angry. "Ethan James Wilson," she called, panic instantly cutting through her voice. "Get back inside right now." But the boy lifted a single finger to his lips, shushing her. Something in that moment froze her mid-step. He wasn't being disrespectful. He was listening. Then the sound came again, a low, wet whimper. Not a human cry. Not the wind. An animal. Olivia threw on David's old flannel jacket, shoved her feet into slippers, and ran after her son, shouting his name over the rain. But Ethan had already reached the edge of the woods, kneeling by a tangled patch of shrubs. He wasn't scared. He looked like he'd been drawn there, like someone had called him. What he found would change their lives forever. Beneath the dripping leaves, covered in mud and streaks of dried blood, lay a massive German shepherd. Its back legs were twisted at sickening angles, as if someone had broken them and walked away. The animal's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. Its coat was soaked and filthy. One eye was swollen nearly shut. When it saw them, it tried to growl. The sound was more heartbreak than threat. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered. "Ethan, move away now." But Ethan didn't budge. "He's scared," the boy said. "He won't bite me. He's just hurting." "Ethan," she started, reaching for his shoulder, but the boy shook his head firmly. "He's talking to me, Mom, in my head. His name is Max." She blinked at him, unsure if she had heard right. "What? His name's Max," Ethan repeated. "Somebody hurt him really bad, but he knows I'm here to help." Half an hour later, David Wilson came home to chaos. Porch light was on, the rain still pouring, and his wife and son were crouched in the mud beside what looked like a half-dead wolf. He dropped his bag and sprinted across the yard, adrenaline already surging. "Ethan, get away from that dog. He's hurt, Daddy!" Ethan shouted, tears in his eyes. "Someone broke his legs on purpose. Max told me." David froze. "Max? Who told you that?" "The dog did," Ethan said simply. "He showed me pictures in my head. A man named Jackson hurt him because Max wouldn't fight, so he left him to die." David looked at his wife. She was pale, wet, shaking, staring at Ethan like he was speaking another language. "I know how it sounds," she said quietly, "but I heard the dog whimpering." Ethan ran straight to him. It's like he knew exactly where he was. The German shepherd, somehow, hadn't tried to bite anyone. It had even let Ethan touch his head, gently, carefully, whispering to him like he was a friend from long ago. "We can't leave him," Ethan said. "Please, Daddy, we have to help him." David hesitated. There was something strange going on, something way beyond just a stray dog. But his son was looking at him with such desperation. And the dog wasn't acting like a stray, okay? He said finally, "Let me grab a blanket from the garage. We'll carry him to the car." "Be careful," Ethan said, as David jogged off. "Max says his right side hurts the most." David stopped cold. He didn't even know which leg looked worse, but his son just knew. If stories like this move Uriel tales of animal heroes, deep bonds, and the courage of the voiceless, consider subscribing to our channel, Heroes for Animals, to hear more powerful stories that deserve to be told. The dog in an old moving blanket and gently, painfully, loaded him into the back of the family's SUV. The animal didn't snap. Didn't growl, just whimpered, and kept his eyes locked on Ethan the entire time. "He trusts you," Olivia whispered. Ethan nodded. "He says he'll come with us if I stay with him." As they drove through the stormy night, the boy whispered constantly to the dog in the back seat, things no one else could hear. And then, just as David was about to turn toward the emergency clinic, "Not there," Ethan said. "Max says we need to go to Dr. Sarah's clinic. She's the only one who can help." "Who?" David asked, frowning into the rearview mirror. "We've never been there." "She helped Max's first family. She remember him." David and Olivia exchanged another glance, the kind that parents give each other when their child is saying something impossible, but it's somehow true. They turned the car. When they knocked on the side door of the small, closed clinic, a tired-looking woman answered, suspicious at first. "We're sorry," David began, "but our son, he says the dog's name is Max." "From the Miller family." The woman's face changed instantly. "My God," she whispered. "That's impossible. Max was stolen a year ago." She threw on a jacket and raced to the car. One look at the dog was all it took. Her face crumpled. "Oh, Max, what did they do to you?" Ethan stepped forward, his little hand on the dog's head. "Jackson broke his legs," he said quietly, "because he wouldn't fight. They called him Fighter 22, but his real name is Max." Dr. Sarah Phillips had worked with animals for over 20 years. She'd seen cruelty. She'd stitched wounds, pulled bullets, removed tumors, and held too many paws while hearts stopped. But nothing prepared her for the broken dog in the back of the Wilsons' SUV. "Let's get him inside," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "I'll open up the clinic." David and Olivia helped carry the dog on the makeshift stretcher, doing their best to keep him level. Max whined in pain, but didn't struggle. He kept his eyes on Ethan the entire time. The moment they stepped into the bright clinical light of the exam room, the difference in Max's demeanor was striking. He tensed, his breathing quickened, his pupils dilated. "He's scared," Ethan said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "He thinks you're like the other ones, the bad ones." Dr. Phillips crouched down, not reaching out, just getting on eye level. "I'm not," she said gently. "Max, I promise you. I'm here to help, like before. Like when the Millers brought you in after your leg got caught in that fence." Max blinked slowly. Ethan turned to her. "He remembers that. He says you gave him the soft treats, the good ones." Sarah's breath caught. "How do you—" "I didn't," Ethan replied. "He told me." She worked through the night. The x-rays revealed 2 shattered femurs, multiple fractured ribs, and a partially collapsed lung. There were deep bruises, old scars, and burns. This wasn't an accident. This was systematic abuse. As Dr. Phillips sedated Max for surgery, Ethan stood by his side, his small hand resting between the dog's ears. Every time Max whimpered or tensed, Ethan would whisper something and the shepherd would go still. David and Olivia watched from a distance torn between awe and concern. "I don't know what's happening," Olivia whispered, "but I've never seen anything like it. It's like they're really talking." David nodded slowly. "Yeah, and what scares me the most is whatever Ethan's saying. It keeps checking out." While Sarah scrubbed in for surgery, Ethan sat in the clinic's small waiting area, refusing to leave. Olivia wrapped him in a fleece blanket and sat beside him. "You need sleep, baby." "I'll sleep after," Ethan murmured. "Max is scared. I have to stay close so he knows I didn't leave." David joined them a few minutes later, holding a cup of warm apple juice. "Here, champ, something to keep you going." Ethan took it without a word, staring at the floor. "They did something bad to him," he said. "Worse than just breaking bones." Olivia knelt. "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated. "They put something in his neck, not like a chip, something that helps them find him." David's eyes narrowed. "Like a tracker." Ethan nodded. "Max says it talks to a black box the bad men have. That's how they follow the dogs when they run away." Dr. Phillips confirmed it. An hour later, she came out of surgery pale, holding a sealed plastic container. Inside was a device the size of a coin medal, slick, and not from any catalog of standard animal tech. "This isn't a microchip," she said. "It's military grade. I've never seen one like it in civilian use." Ethan, half asleep in a waiting room chair, opened his eyes. "You broke it, right?" Sarah glanced at him, surprised. "Said you would." I disabled it before I removed it, she confirmed. No signal, no battery. It's dead. Ethan nodded. Max was really scared about that. At sunrise, Max lay wrapped in warm blankets in the recovery area. Despite the 4 lines in the casts, his breathing was steady. For the first time, he seemed at peace. Ethan stood beside him, whispering something low. His hand stroked the dog's neck with delicate fingers. He's dreaming about his first family, Ethan said softly, about the little girl who gave him sandwich crusts when nobody was looking. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Laya, she whispered. Laya Miller. She was 7. She used to sneak him bites of PB&J every visit. I never told anyone that. Ethan looked at her. Max remembers everything. The Wilsons didn't go home. Sarah insisted they stay in her apartment above the clinic until they could figure out what was really going on and what they were dealing with. I know this all sounds insane, she told them over coffee, but something isn't right. If what Ethan says is true, and there are other dogs, there are, Ethan interrupted from the corner. How many? David asked. 15, Ethan said. In cages, under a house, with a red door. Olivia dropped her spoon. How do you know that? Max showed me. David pulled Sarah aside. This man, Ethan, keeps mentioning. Jackson, do you know him? She shook her head. No, but the name. There was talk years ago. Rumors about a guy who trained fighting dogs in the county. No one ever found evidence. Ethan said he worked for someone else, Olivia added. A man with white hair, fancy suits. They called him Mr. M. Sarah's eyes darkened. Alexander Monarch. Later that afternoon, a sleek black sedan parked across from the clinic. The man who stepped out wore a sharp gray suit, his hair perfectly combed, his face calm. He knocked at the front door. Sarah met him halfway. I'm looking for a German. Shepherd, he said smoothly. We believe he was picked up yesterday. I'm with the county animal control. She asked. He flashed a badge. What's your name? Lawrence Johnson. Sarah paused. He's recovering from surgery. You can't take him. Lawrence didn't smile. I have authority. If you interfere, there will be consequences. Behind her, Ethan appeared in the hallway, eyes wide. That's him, he whispered. That's the man who broke Max's legs. When Sarah refused to release the dog, Lawrence left, but not before issuing a quiet threat. You've made a mistake, he said coldly. We'll be back. They locked the clinic and double-checked every window. That night, Max growled. In his sleep, whimpering, Ethan curled beside him on the floor, refusing to move. He says they're watching us, the boy whispered, from a car down the road. David peered through the blinds and spotted the black sedan still idling beneath. A street lamp, a chill ran down his back. They weren't making this up. Something was coming. As Olivia tucked Ethan in, he asked the question they were all afraid to answer. Mommy, what if they take Max again? We won't let them. He looked at her, eyes serious beyond his years. They won't just come for Max. Max says they want me to, because I can hear him. A silence fell over the room. Outside, the sedan waited Dot inside. A wounded dog healed, and in the shadows of Pinewood, an empire built on pain stirred at exactly 2:47 a.m. Max lifted his head from the blanket. Ethan stirred in his sleep. One small arm still draped protectively over the dog's shoulders. David, half dozing in a recliner nearby, sat up when he heard the low, rumbling growl coming from Max's throat. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made David's chest tighten. Then Ethan sat bolt upright. They're coming, he whispered. David was out of the chair in seconds. What? Max says they're coming tonight. For him, and for me. Olivia appeared in the doorway, already wide awake. We need to leave now. They packed quickly. Olivia stuffed essentials into a duffel bag: snacks, clothes, Ethan's asthma inhaler. David carried Max with surprising ease, the dog's weight awkward in his arms, his body limp but eyes alert. Dr. Phillips had offered her lake cabin the day before. Just in case, remote, isolated, no one knew about it outside her family. By 3:15, they were on the road. Ethan sat in the back seat beside Max, holding the dog's paw like it was the most natural thing in the world. He's trying to hear the other dogs. Ethan said softly, but it's getting harder. David gripped the steering wheel tighter. Why harder? "They're being moved," Ethan replied. "The ones that are too injured. They're not going with the others." Olivia turned around slowly in the front seat. "What do you mean, baby? They're going to kill them." Dr. Phillips' cabin sat tucked beneath a grove of pines near Crescent Lake, an hour from Pinewood. It had no internet, no lamp, and no neighbors. Just a fireplace, a few spare blankets, and a single gravel road in and out. It was perfect and terrifying. They arrived just after dawn. The air smelled like wet bark and lake water. Ethan guided Max to a thick rug in front of the fireplace, while Olivia opened the shutters to let in the gray morning light for the first time in days. There was quiet, but it didn't last. Ethan sat cross-legged beside Max, eyes closed, face pinched in concentration. His lips barely moved as he whispered something no one else could hear. Then his head snapped up. He says, "We can't wait for the police." David looked up from unpacking. "Ethan, they're moving." "The dogs today, they already started. Detective Ramirez is working on it," Olivia said quickly. "She said she needed time to get a warrant. She won't make it," Ethan interrupted. "The trucks are already loading," Max says. "Once they're gone, they'll disappear for good." By 9 a.m., a text came through. It was from Dr. Phillips. "Lawrence and 2 others showed up at my clinic 20 minutes after you left. Claimed to have a new court order. I stalled them. Be careful. I think they know you're gone." David read the message out loud, then lowered the phone. They were really coming for Ethan. "And Max," Ethan added softly, "but mostly me." That was the moment when David stopped doubting his son's quiet certainty. The way the dog never took his eyes off Ethan. The threats, the tracker, it was all real. They weren't safe. That afternoon they tried to figure out what to do. "Next, we could call the press," Olivia suggested. "Blow it wide open." David shook his head. "With what evidence? A broken dog and a little boy saying he hears voices." "What about Detective Ramirez?" Olivia asked. "She said she believed us." Ethan looked up from where he was gently wiping Max's face. "With a damp cloth, she's trying," he said. "But she's not the only cop. Some of them work for the man with the white hair." Olivia knelt next to him. "Ethan, does Max know his name?" The boy tilted his head, eyes distant. "No, they just call him Boss or Mr. M. He doesn't come to the fights often, but when he does, ... the dogs get real quiet." David sat back on his heels. "You've seen him?" "Max did," Ethan said. "He remembers everything. The basement, the cages, the needles." No one spoke for a long moment. Later that evening, a car pulled into the gravel driveway. David jumped up, grabbing the tire. Iron from the closet, Olivia rushed to the window and exhaled when she saw the face behind the wheel. Dr. Sarah Phillips, Max, immediately perked up when she entered, tail thumping weakly. "I brought more antibiotics and some soft food," she said, setting down her bag. And ... "I brought someone." She stepped aside, and a woman followed her in. Short, sharp-eyed, wearing plain clothes. She looked like someone who took notes for a living and wasn't afraid to kick in a door. "Jessica Ramirez," she said, flashing a badge, "County Sheriff's Department, off the record." David offered a stunned handshake. "You're the detective." Ramirez nodded. "Sarah briefed me. I've been chasing shadows on this dogfighting ring for over a year. Every time I get close, the trail goes cold. Judges won't sign off, evidence vanishes. Now I know why." "Monarch," David said. "Alexander Monarch," Ramirez confirmed. "Wealthy, powerful, owns half the properties in this county, including one particular farmhouse with a red door," Ethan said quietly. Ramirez blinked. "You," he showed me, Ethan said, pointing to Max. "The cages are under the barn. The dogs are crying." Ramirez's eyes softened. "I believe you. They went over everything. The tracker, the threats, the black sedan, the sealed medical records, Ethan's connection to Max. There's no precedent for this," Ramirez admitted, glancing toward Ethan. "But I've learned not to ignore what can't be explained, especially when it keeps being right." "So what do we do?" Olivia asked. "We wait for the warrant," Ramirez said. "But Monarch's got his fingers in every office. It'll take time." "We don't have time," Ethan said suddenly. Standing up, "They're leaving tonight." Ramirez looked skeptical. "How do you know?" "Because the dogs are telling Max," Ethan said. "And he's telling me?" Ramirez opened her mouth to respond. But DID in single quotes. TI instead. She asked, "Where is this farmhouse?" David pointed to the map on Sarah's phone, 15 miles east, near the Orchard Highway. Ethan gave us directions earlier. Jessica narrowed her eyes. That's where the Miller's dog was taken from last year. Same neighborhood. Max was their dog, Ethan said. Ramirez looked between them. All right, let's take a drive. As they prepared to leave, Max struggled to stand. No, Olivia said quickly. You need to rest. Ethan knelt beside him. He says, he needs to come. What? No, David said. He just had surgery. Ethan touched his head gently. He says the other dogs won't trust us if he's not there. We'll bring him in the car, David said finally, but we stay in the vehicle, no matter what. They packed up again. David, Olivia, Ethan, Max in the backhand followed Ramirez's unmarked SUV. Into the night, it was near midnight when they pulled off the main road. They stopped just short of a long gravel path leading to a rundown farmhouse. Ramirez lifted binoculars. There, she whispered, multiple outbuildings, and ... red door confirmed. Ethan's breath caught. That's it. From the trees, they heard faint barking. Max growled, then whined. They're scared, Ethan said. David checked his phone. No signal there. About to load the trucks, Ethan said suddenly. Max says, if we don't help now, they'll all be gone. Jessica glanced over. We're not going in without backup. Ethan's voice rose. They're going to die. Max stepped out. Of the car, shaky, wounded, unbroken. He howled once long and low. Then, from the trees ... came answers. Dozens of them. Hunting dogs, farm mutts, strays, all shapes, all sizes, all silent, all watching. Olivia gasped. Where ... where did they come from? Ethan looked up at Max. He called them for one long, breathless moment. No one moved. The woods around the farmhouse, quiet just seconds ago, were now alive with rustling leaves, soft paws on pine needles, and the low murmur of dozens of dogs emerging from the darkness. Hunting hounds, mutts with matted coats, old farm dogs, and lean strays with haunted eyes. They stepped forward in ones and twos until the clearing was ringed by a silent army of canines, all watching Max. Max stood shakily, chest heaving with the effort, his front legs steady, his hind legs wrapped in protective braces and bandages. But his eyes burned with purpose. Ethan knelt beside him and whispered, Are you sure? The big shepherd turned his head and gave a short, breathy huff. He says yes, Ethan told the group. He says the others inside will recognize his scent. It'll give them hope. David swallowed hard, scanning the tree line and the barn behind the red-doored farmhouse. This is insane, he muttered. We've got a 4-year-old, a recovering dog, and a pack of strays ready to start a revolution. Ramirez smirked, the faintest glimmer of admiration flashing in her eyes. I've seen worse odds. They moved quickly, using the thick woods. For cover, Ramirez led the way, her flashlight off, sidearm holstered but ready. David and Olivia followed close behind, Ethan in between them with Max walking just a few paces ahead. The other dogs kept their distance, but flanked the family like quiet sentries. The house itself was dark, just one dim porch light flickering above the red door, but the barn was alive. Through small reinforced windows, light leaked out. A generator hummed softly from somewhere behind the building, and then a sound, barking, frenzied, muffled, desperate. They know something's happening, Ethan whispered. Max stopped near a side entrance. He lowered his head to the ground and whined. Softly, there's a tunnel, Ethan said, under the barn. Max says it's where they keep the cages. Ramirez crept up to the door and tested the knob. Locked, she signaled to David. Help me look for another way in. Olivia, stay with Ethan. But before they could take a step, Max growled. Not at them, at the shadows. 2 men had emerged from behind the barn, armed. Talking in hushed voices, I don't like this new guy poking around, one said. He wants results. Big money's coming tonight. Then let's move the rest of them and torch the place. Make it look like it never existed. They laughed. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. Ramirez's voice was ice. We're out of time. They retreated a few yards into the woods, regrouping in a tight circle. They're planning to destroy everything, dog's evidence. All of it, Ramirez whispered. If we wait for backup, we lose everything. so we don't wait," David said. "What's the play?" Ramirez turned to Ethan. "You said Max can direct the others." Ethan nodded. Ramirez exhaled. "Then we need a distraction. We get the dogs to lure the guards away. I'll sneak inside, get photos of the cages, the tags, anything I can use. To get a warrant and nail Monarch to the wall, David, you and Olivia stay with Ethan. Don't leave his side." "I'm going with you," David said firmly. Ramirez looked at him. "You a cop?" "No," he said, "but I'm a father, and I'm not letting this happen on my watch." The plan was simple. Max would signal the stray pack to draw the guards into the woods. Ramirez and David would enter the barn. Olivia and Ethan would stay hidden until it was safe, but nothing about it felt simple. Ethan knelt beside Max, forehead pressed to the dogs. "Be careful," he whispered. "You can't run yet." Max licked the boy's cheek, then let out one long, low howl. The other dogs responded instantly in coordinated bursts. They rushed out from the trees barking, growling, knocking over barrels and trash bins near the fence. The guard shouted, drawing weapons, giving chase. Ramirez waited 6 beats, then moved. She and David crept to the barn's rear door and slipped inside. The smell hit them. First, rotting meat, bleach, blood. Ramirez covered her nose with one sleeve. David gagged. The barn was worse than either had imagined. Below the hay-strewn floor was a trapdoor, partially hidden by a tarp. Ramirez yanked it open and shined her light down into a concrete hallway. They descended slowly. The walls were lined with cages, heavy-duty, bolted, reinforced. Inside, dogs of every size and breed cowered in silence. Most had scars. A few had fresh wounds. One lifted his head weakly, nose twitching. "He smells Max," David whispered. Ramirez snapped photo after photo tags. Equipment, syringes, bedding slips, blood-stained harnesses. "This is enough," she muttered. "I can get the feds involved now." A creak echoed above. Voices. They were no longer alone, back outside. Olivia held Ethan close in the shadow of a thicket of fir trees. "Stay down, honey," she whispered. "Don't move until I say." But Ethan's eyes were wide, glowing in the faint moonlight. "He's in trouble," he said. "Who?" "Max." He tore away from her grasp and bolted. "Ethan." Inside the barn, David and Ramirez pressed themselves against a wall as a man. With white hair, descended the stairs, Alexander Monarch. He walked slowly like he owned the place. He didn't notice them at first, just strode down the row of cages, clicking his tongue like he was inspecting merchandise. "Such a waste," he muttered. "So many weak ones. Tonight, we finish this." Then he stopped, sensing something. "Who's there?" Ramirez stepped out first, badge up, County Sheriff's Department. "Step away from the animals." Monarch smirked. "No warrant, no jurisdiction, no case." Then David stepped out behind her. "We have all the proof we need." Monarch's expression soured. "Ah, the father, and the mutt's little handler." He reached inside his jacket. Ramirez yelled, "Gun!" and everything exploded at once. Outside, Ethan reached the barn's front entrance just as Max barreled toward it, ignoring the pain in his legs. The two met at the door and pushed through together. The hallway inside was chaos. Monarch had fled back upstairs. Ramirez gave chase. David was helping a wounded dog escape its cage. Max howled a call to the others, and suddenly, the barn became a battleground of rescue. Dogs barking, chains clattering, Ethan running cage 2. Cage, whispering names, Max says. "This one's name is Duke," he told David. "He was stolen from a fire station 2 towns over." They moved fast. Ethan was everywhere, opening cages, calming dogs, guiding Max. It was like watching a conductor lead an orchestra of the lost. By the time Ramirez returned Monarch in cuffs, furious and bleeding from a phalathon, had freed every cage. The dogs followed him like a parade of survivors outside. The strays stood at attention, waiting. Max limped to the front of the group, turned toward the wood's end, let out one final howl. Then, like water returning to a river, the pack vanished. The barn stood empty, the red door finally open. They didn't go home that night. Too many dogs needed help, too many wounds to stitch, both visible and invisible. Dr. Phillips met them at the edge of the woods with a van full of supplies. Animal control officers, real ones, arrived shortly after. Led by federal agents who'd been quietly monitoring Monarch for months, unable to act without proof, Ramirez handed them everything they needed: the photos, the tracker, the names, the red door dot. As the sun rose, Ethan and Max sat on a hill overlooking the lake near the cabin. Olivia wrapped a blanket around them both. "You did something incredible," she said softly. "You really saved them." 3 days after the raid on the red-doored barn, Pinewood looked unchanged on the surface. Same quiet streets, same sleepy. Downtown, same humming soda machines outside the gas station, but for the Wilsons, nothing would ever feel normal again. They didn't go home right away. After the chaos of the rescue, Dr. Phillips insisted they remain at her lake cabin a little longer. Max needed round-the-clock care. Ethan needed rest. And no one, not even Detective Ramirez, was confident that the danger had passed. "He won't. Stop trying," Ramirez warned them. "Men like Monarch never really lose, they just regroup." David had nodded slowly. "Then we stay alert." By morning, the national news had picked up the story. Illegal dogfighting ring busted in rural Georgia, 17 dogs rescued. Sheriff's deputy credited with evidence. Ethan's name wasn't mentioned, nor Max's. That was intentional. Ramirez said it was safer that way, but the headlines only told half the truth. They didn't mention the child who navigated a maze of cages like he'd seen it in his dreams, or the dog who defied crushed bones to save his own kind, or the quiet conversations shared between a 4-year-old and a canine that changed everything. Those parts weren't so easy to explain. Max recovered faster than anyone expected. Dr. Phillips had never seen anything like it. His fractures, though severe, were healing rapidly. The infection had cleared. His breathing was steady. And most incredibly, his spirit had returned. He wagged his tail now. He greeted Ethan each morning with a slow nuzzle to the boy's shoulder, and he slept soundly for the first time in what must have been years. But there was something else. Something deeper. Max seemed aware of more than his surroundings. He listened differently, responded not just to voice, but to thought. More than once, David caught himself thinking about checking Max's bandages, only to find the dog already lying down, leg raised. It was eerie and beautiful. "Are you scared?" Olivia asked Ethan one afternoon, as they sat on the porch swing overlooking the lake. The boy looked out across the water. Sometimes she waited, but not of Max, he said. Not of the dogs. Of what then? He was quiet for a while. Of forgetting. Olivia turned toward him. Forgetting what? What it feels like, he said. To hear them, to understand. He rested his head on her shoulder. What if I grow up and can't hear them anymore? She kissed the top of his head. Then I'll remind you, every day. That night, Ramirez came by with 2 federal agents. They sat around the fireplace, sipping weak coffee and eating reheated chicken pot pie Olivia had made from scratch. The agents were kind but serious. They had more questions than answers. How exactly did you know where the barn was? One asked David. He just told us, David said, nodding toward Ethan. He described it, down to the door color and the guard's routes. And how did he know? Ethan was in the next room, building a tower of dog treats, while Max watched with quiet amusement. We've stopped asking, Olivia said simply. We've seen enough to know it's real, even if we don't understand it. After dinner, Ramirez sat outside with David. I've got enough to bury Monarch, she said. He's going away for a long time. But? David asked, sensing the hesitation in her voice. But there's already a new name floating around, she said. A different property, different town, same setup. David clenched his jaw. You think it's a network? Ramirez nodded. Underground, quiet, rich men, placing bets on pain. It's older than either of us. She paused, then added, Ethan's going to be a target. David didn't respond at first. Then he said he already was. The next day, a letter arrived, handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You should have stayed out of it. There are more of us than you think. No signature. David burned it in the fireplace without showing Ethan. Max grew stronger by the hour. Ethan resumed reading. To him, his favorite was the Velveteen Rabbit. He liked the parts about becoming real only when you'd been loved. So much, it hurt. Max listened to every word, like it was a commandment. By the end of the week, he was walking short distances. He could climb onto the couch with help. He even tried to sneak a slice of leftover bacon off David's plate, one morning earning a stern, but loving scolding from Olivia and a snort of laughter from Ethan. "This is home now," Ethan declared, and just like that it was, but the dreams didn't stop. Ethan started waking up in the middle of the night, eyes wide, skin clammy, whispering names, dog names, places, times. "They're still out there," he said one morning at breakfast. "They're herding more of them." David and Olivia exchanged a glance, the kind that parents share when something is bigger than them. "I have to help," Ethan added. "I can help." They didn't want to say yes. No parent would. But when Dr. Phillips came by later that day with a stack of messages pet owners from all over Georgia calling her clinic, desperate about their missing dogs, they realized this wasn't over. Even close, Ramirez visited again, this time with a plainclothes agent from the Department of Justice. They sat with the Wilsons for hours, discussing options, protocol, protection, risk. They talked about witness anonymity, guardian programs, even tentatively media exposure. "You're sitting on a miracle," the agent said, looking at Ethan, "but it's dangerous. People will try to twist it, discredit it." "I don't care if they believe me," Ethan said quietly. "I just want to stop the hurting." In the end, they reached an agreement. Ethan wouldn't be paraded in front of cameras, but his connection, his bond with Max would, be acknowledged in official records as informed sensory communication. It was a compromise. It sounded clinical enough to be palatable to the legal system, but human enough to honor what really happened. Ramirez would keep investigating, and the Wilsons, they would keep listening to Max. To the other dogs. To the other dogs no one else seemed to hear. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees and the lake reflected the colors of fire, David sat beside Max on the cabin steps. The dog's ears twitched. "He's asking if we're going to keep him," Ethan said from behind. David looked over his shoulder. "What do you think?" Ethan smiled. "I think he already knows the answer." That night, Ethan and Max curled up in front of the fireplace. David and Olivia watched them, boy and dog, side by side, eyes closed, breathing in sync. "I used to think we adopted a rescue dog," David said softly. Olivia nodded. "But maybe it's the other way around." 6 weeks later, the Wilsons returned home. Their house on Birch Hollow Lane looked the same as the day they left, same creaky mailbox, same chipped front porch paint, same red tricycle tipped over in the yard. It wasn't the house that had changed. It was them. Max padded out of the SUV on his own. No stretcher, no limp, just cautious, deliberate steps, his braces now gone, replaced by strength and healing. He sniffed the air once and let out a low, almost questioning whine. "Yeah," Ethan said, stepping beside him, "we're really home." Town had heard whispers, of course, something about a dog-fighting ring, something about that strange quiet boy and the German shepherd with the golden eyes, but no one knew the full story. They couldn't T-dot. It wasn't something you could explain over coffee at the hardware store. It was too big, too strange, too sacred, so the Wilsons said very little. Olivia returned to her part-time job at the library. David, for now, stayed home watching Ethan like a hawk. And Max became something of a legend. He went everywhere with Ethan. To the park, to the post office, to the farmer's market, where Old Man Carson would hand him scraps of smoked turkey from behind the counter and say, "That's a hero dog, right?" There, Max never barked, never growled. But if anyone came too close to Ethan too fast, his body would shift, subtle but alert. People learned quickly. If Max didn't trust you, Ethan didn't either, and vice versa. The boy and the dog were inseparable. Every few nights, Ethan still had the dreams. Sometimes they were of the barn, dark and cold and full of pain. Other times, they were of places he hadn't seen yet. Long dirt roads, trucks with cages, flashlights sweeping the woods. Max would whine beside him, nudge him awake, and together they'd sit under the window. Listening to the night. "They're still out there," Ethan would whisper, still waiting. Detective Ramirez kept in touch. She'd call once a week, sometimes from Georgia, sometimes Alabama, once from Louisiana. More dogs, more barns. She told David, "We're working on building a full map. Monarch's not talking, but someone else might flip." She never said Ethan's name on the phone, never mentioned Max. They all understood this thing they'd uncovered was bigger than a single arrest, bigger than a farmhouse with a red door. It was a network of cruelty, buried under money and fear. but it was crumbling now, one story at a time. Then, one morning, a plain envelope arrived. No return address. Brown mutt in a cage, eyes wide, ribs showing, and 2 words scrawled in pen across the bottom. Please help. Ethan looked at Max. Max stood up, walked to the door, and sat down facing it. No bark, no growl, just ready. They took it to Ramirez. She met them at a diner 2 towns over where no one knew them. Her face was tight with exhaustion. Jasper's. A rough place, she said, setting down her coffee. Rural, isolated. T, will you go? Olivia asked. I can, Ramirez said. But if I do, I might need help off the record. David and Olivia exchanged a look. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's not just one place, he said. Max and I, we've been writing them down. He spread out a crude, hand-drawn map. Towns, arrows, numbers, all scrawled in a child's handwriting. These are the ones we still feel. Ramirez stared at it, then looked at Max, who sat calmly beside the table, tail resting across Ethan's foot. How is this possible? She murmured. Olivia touched her hand gently. We've stopped asking by spring. Max was fully cleared by Dr. Phillips. No more meds, no more bandages, she announced with a smile. Just some stretching, lots of love, and probably fewer bacon bits. No signature. David burned it in the fireplace without showing Ethan. Max grew stronger by the hour. Ethan resumed reading to him. His favorite was The Velveteen Rabbit. He liked the parts about becoming real only when you'd been loved. So much it hurt Max, listened to every word like it was a commandment. By the end of the week, he was walking short distances. He could climb onto the couch with help. He even tried to sneak a slice of leftover bacon off David's plate, one morning earning a stern, but loving scolding from Olivia and a snort of laughter from Ethan. This is home now, Ethan declared, and just like that, it was. But the dreams didn't stop. Ethan started waking up in the middle of the night, eyes wide, skin clammy, whispering names, dog names, places, times. They're still out there, he said one morning at breakfast. They're hurting more of them. David and Olivia exchanged a glance, the kind that parents share when something is bigger than them. I have to help, Ethan added. I can help. They didn't want to say yes. No parent would. But when Dr. Phillips came by later that day with a stack of messages pet owners from all over Georgia calling her clinic, desperate about their missing dogs, they realized this wasn't over. Not even close. Ramirez visited again, this time with a plainclothes agent from the Department of Justice. They sat with the Wilsons for hours, discussing options, protocol, protection, risk. They talked about witness anonymity, guardian programs, even tentatively media exposure. You're sitting on a miracle, the agent said, looking at Ethan. But it's dangerous, people. We'll try to twist it, discredit it. I don't care if they believe me, Ethan said quietly. I just want to stop the hurting. In the end, they reached an agreement. Ethan wouldn't be paraded in front of cameras, but his connection, his bond with Max would be acknowledged in official records as informed sensory communication. It was a compromise. It sounded clinical enough to be palatable to the legal system, but human enough to honor what really happened. Ramirez would keep investigating, and the Wilsons, they would keep listening to Max, to the other dogs, to the cries no one else seemed to hear. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees and the lake reflected the colors of fire, David sat beside Max on the cabin steps. The dog's ears twitched. He's asking if we're going to keep him, Ethan said from behind. David looked over his shoulder. What do you think? Ethan smiled. I think he already knows the answer. That night, Ethan and Max curled up in front of the fireplace. David and Olivia watched them boy and dog. Side by side, eyes closed, breathing in sync. I used to think we adopted a rescue dog, David said softly. Olivia nodded. But maybe it's the other way around. 6 weeks later, the Wilsons returned home. Their house on Birch Hollow Lane looked the same as the day they left. Same creaky mailbox, same chipped front porch paint, same red tricycle tipped over in the yard. But everything felt different now. It wasn't the house that had changed. It was them. Max padded out of the SUV on his own. No stretcher, no limp. Just cautious, deliberate steps, his braces now gone. replaced by strength and healing. He sniffed the air once and let out a low, almost questioning whine. "Yeah," Ethan said, stepping beside him. "We're really home." Neighbors stared. Town had heard whispers, of course. Something about a dogfighting ring. Something about that strange, quiet boy and the German shepherd with the golden eyes. But no one knew the full story. They couldn't T-dot. It wasn't something you could explain over coffee at the hardware store. It was too big, too strange, too sacred. So, the Wilsons said very little. Olivia returned to her part-time job at the library. David, for now, stayed home watching Ethan like a hawk. And Max became something of a legend. He went everywhere with Ethan, to the park, to the post office, to the farmer's market, where old man Carson would hand him scraps of smoked turkey from behind the counter and say, "That's a hero dog, right?" There, Max never barked, never growled. But if anyone came too close to Ethan too fast, his body would shift subtle but alert. People learned quickly. If Max didn't trust you, Ethan didn't either, and vice versa. The boy and the dog were inseparable. Every few nights, Ethan still had the dreams. Sometimes they were of the barn dark and cold and full of pain. Other times, they were of places he hadn't seen yet. Long dirt roads, trucks with cages, flashlights sweeping the woods. Max would whine beside him, nudge him awake, and together they'd sit under the window, listening to the night. "They're still out there," Ethan would whisper, "still waiting." Detective Ramirez kept in touch. She'd call once a week sometimes from Georgia, sometimes Alabama, once from Louisiana. "More dogs, more barns," she told David. "We're working on building a full map. Monarch's not talking, but someone else might flip." She never said Ethan's name on the phone, never mentioned Max. They all understood this thing they'd uncovered was bigger than a single arrest, bigger than a farmhouse with a red door. It was a network of cruelty, buried under money and fear. But it was crumbling now, one story at a time. Then, one morning, a plain envelope arrived. No return address, just the word Jasper scribbled on the back. Inside, a blurry photo of a brown mutt in a cage, eyes wide, ribs showing, and 2 words scrawled in pen across the bottom. Ethan looked at Max. Max stood up, walked to the door, and sat down facing it. No bark, no growl, just ready they took it. To Ramirez, she met them at a diner 2 towns over, where no one knew them. Her face was tight with exhaustion. "A rough place," she said, setting down her coffee. "Rural, isolated. Tea. Will you go?" Olivia asked. "I can," Ramirez said, "but if I do, I might need help off the record." David and Olivia exchanged a look. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "It's not just one place," he said. "Max and we've been writing them down." He spread out a crude, hand-drawn map. Towns, arrows, numbers, all scrawled in a child's handwriting. "These are the ones we still feel." Ramirez stared at it, then looked at Max, who sat calmly beside the table, tail resting across Ethan's foot. "How is this possible?" she murmured. Olivia touched her hand gently. "We've stopped asking." By spring, Max was fully cleared. By Dr. Phillips, no more meds, no more bandages. She announced with a smile, "Just some stretching, lots of love, and probably fewer bacon bits."